Across human history, the concept of an underworld has been a recurring theme, emerging in various forms in different cultures. These shadowy realms are not simply places of death. They are symbolic landscapes that represent deep, often spiritual journeys. Each culture has its own version, with unique structures and challenges designed to test and transform the soul. From the eerie quiet of the Greek underworld to the intense trials of the Egyptian Duat, the underworld is not just about an afterlife. It's a space where one confronts darkness, both external and internal. It is in these realms that the soul undergoes purification, facing trials that strip it of attachments, desires, and falsehoods. In occult traditions, the underworld is more than a simple map of death. It's an essential part of the journey toward spiritual transcendence. These underworlds aren't just places of punishment. They're areas of transformation, where the soul is tested, refined, and reborn. In the occult view, death is not an end, but a necessary passage, one that mirrors the process of confronting one's own shadow, those parts of the psyche that we try to repress or deny. The journey through these realms is often a metaphor for the deeper work of self-discovery, where one must face their inner fears, flaws, and unresolved karmic debts. It is in these dark places that true spiritual growth often begins. Each culture's underworld map serves as a guide to these transformative processes. And while the specifics may differ, the core purpose remains strikingly similar. It's a journey of self-realization, growth, and eventual transcendence. Whether it's the Elysian fields of the Greek underworld, the 9 levels of Mictlan, or the trials of the Tibetan Bardo, the underworld serves as a mirror to the soul's ultimate potential for transformation. It is here that the soul confronts its shadow, and, in doing so, finds the key to unlocking greater wisdom and deeper spiritual freedom. In Greek and Roman mythology, the underworld, known as Hades in Greek and Pluto in Roman tradition, is a place where the souls of the deceased journey after death. But the underworld is not a monolithic, uniform realm. It is divided into different areas, each with a distinct purpose, and each corresponding to the nature of the soul that resides there. At the deepest level, there is Tartarus, a dark and dreadful pit reserved for those who committed the most heinous crimes. It's a space of endless torment, a place of purification through suffering. Those who end up here are not simply punished, but are in the midst of an intense spiritual transformation, one that requires facing the darkest aspects of the self, the accumulated guilt and unresolved karma of a life lived in ignorance or wickedness. On the other hand, the Elysian fields provide a stark contrast. They are a peaceful realm for those souls who lived virtuous lives. It is a place of rest, reward, and tranquility, offering the soul an opportunity to enjoy eternal bliss. But even within the Elysian fields, there is no escaping the process of transformation. This is not a place of stagnation or complacency. The soul here is still evolving, though it may appear to be at rest. There is a quiet sense of completion, a gentle conclusion to the long cycle of incarnation. For those souls who are neither virtuous nor wicked, there lies the asphodel meadows, an intermediate space. It's neither a place of suffering nor of peace, a realm of neutrality where the ordinary souls find their resting place. The souls here are neither blessed nor cursed, and the realm reflects their ambiguity. In occult traditions, Hades represents the ultimate confrontation with the shadow. It's the space where the soul undergoes judgment, not by an external force, but by its own internal reckoning. Facing one's inner darkness, confronting desires and attachments, and undergoing a spiritual purification process are core themes in the occult interpretation of Hades. The soul must face itself, its most hidden parts, before it can transcend. Here, Ritualistic practices often focus on engaging with this dark side of the self, understanding one's deep-seated desires, fears, and traumas. It is through this confrontation that the soul becomes ready for its next step in the journey, whether that be ascension to the Elysian fields or a deeper transformation through suffering in Tartarus. One of the most significant figures in this narrative is Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Persephone's cyclical return from the depths of Hades symbolizes the perpetual cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Her annual descent into the underworld and subsequent return to the living world mirrors the natural rhythms of the human experience. Life and death are inextricably tied together, and it is in the death of one phase that another phase is born. This cyclical nature is crucial in occult practices, where the idea of rebirth is central. Each descent into the underworld is not an end, but a necessary part of spiritual evolution. Equally significant is Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld. In the occult tradition, Cerberus represents the inner fears that one must face and overcome before moving forward. To pass into the deeper realms of the soul, one must face these fears, symbolized by the three heads of Cerberus. These heads can represent the various dimensions of the self that need to be understood: the unconscious, the shadow self, and the ego. To transcend, the soul must confront these aspects head-on, and, in doing so, gain the strength and wisdom necessary to proceed on its journey. Thus, the Greek and Roman underworld provides a framework for understanding the soul's journey through darkness, suffering, and ultimately rebirth. The various realms within Hades reflect the different states of being and consciousness that a soul may experience as it undergoes spiritual purification, facing its own darkness and emerging transformed. The Egyptian underworld, known as the Duat, presents a complex and mysterious journey that goes beyond the mere concept of an afterlife. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, the Duat is not a static place. It's a dynamic, intricate realm where the soul undergoes multiple trials and transformations. The journey through the Duat is not one of passivity, but an active and often perilous path that tests the soul's worthiness to enter the afterlife, represented by the field of reeds. This realm is replete with dangers, challenges, and obstacles, many of which are embodied by terrifying creatures like venomous snakes, demons, and hostile deities. Each obstacle is a spiritual test, designed to strip the soul of its earthly attachments and bring it closer to divine purity. In occult traditions, the Duat is often seen as an initiatory space, much like a mystery school where the soul must undergo trials to reach its ultimate goal of enlightenment. The trials are both external and internal, mirroring the battles that we face in life between our higher self and lower desires. The Egyptian Book of the Dead outlines many of these trials, such as the soul's journey through the halls of judgment, where it must prove its righteousness before Osiris, the god of the afterlife. It is here that the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart is found to be lighter than the feather, the soul is deemed pure and can proceed to the afterlife. If not, the soul faces annihilation or eternal wandering in the Duat. The symbolism of the heart and Ma'at is central to understanding the occult significance of the Duat. In occult philosophy, the heart represents the soul's true essence, its alignment with divine truth, and its purity. The soul's progress through the Duat is a reflection of its ability to face the shadow self, the darker aspects of the psyche that are weighed down by falsehood, attachment, and ignorance. It is only by shedding these aspects that the soul can ascend into the field of reeds, a place of peace and eternal rest. In this way, the journey through the Duat mirrors the soul's process of inner purification, where it must confront its own shadows and transcend them to achieve spiritual freedom. Key deities such as Osiris, Anubis, and Thoth play significant roles in this journey. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, represents the final destination of the soul, a state of eternal life after spiritual rebirth. Anubis, the god of mummification and funerary rites, symbolizes the process of preservation and protection during the soul's journey. Anubis's role in occult traditions often represents the guardian of the threshold, assisting the soul in passing through the trials of the Duat. Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, is the one who records the judgments, ensuring that the soul's journey is marked and its actions are weighed with divine fairness. In occult practices, Thoth often symbolizes the need for spiritual wisdom and knowledge as the soul traverses through darkness and chaos. The Duat, then, in the occult view, is not merely a dark, oppressive place. It is a sacred space of transformation. It is through facing these trials, through confronting the darker aspects of the soul, that the soul reaches a higher state of being. This journey is not one of external suffering, but of internal awakening, an awakening to the deeper truths of existence and the soul's ultimate unity with divine wisdom. The key to success in navigating the Duat lies in the soul's ability to remain aligned with Ma'at, with truth, balance, and harmony. It is a space where the soul must let go of false identities and attachments to the material world. The rituals surrounding the Duat often focus on the idea of balance, the balance between life and death, light and dark, good and evil. It is through this balance, achieved by confronting the darker aspects of the self, that the soul can be reborn in a purer form. In summary, the Egyptian underworld is not merely a passage through death, but a deep, transformative process of spiritual purification. The soul's journey through the Duat reflects the challenges and trials one must face when engaging in inner work, where the confrontation with darkness, whether personal flaws, fears, or attachments, is an essential part of the path to spiritual enlightenment. The soul must pass through these trials, guided by the wisdom of deities like Osiris and Thoth, before it can find peace in the eternal field of reeds. The Mesopotamian underworld, known as Irkalla, is a realm that stands in stark contrast to the vibrant, often glorified images of the afterlife found in other ancient cultures. In the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian traditions, Irkalla is a land ruled by Ereshkigal, the goddess of death. Unlike other underworlds that are filled with judgment or spiritual trials, Irkalla is depicted as a shadowy, silent place, a dark realm of isolation where the soul is trapped in eternal stillness. It is a place of despair, where the dead are cut off from the living world and forgotten by those they left behind. Souls enter Irkalla without hope of return, wandering through its desolate expanse with no clear sense of purpose other than to endure the endless passage of time. In occult thought, Irkalla symbolizes the soul's descent into utter darkness. It is a space not of active torment, but of passive stagnation. Here, the soul is forced to confront a different kind of spiritual trial, not one of active suffering, but of existential despair and spiritual inertia. This absence of purpose and direction is a crucial aspect of Irkalla's symbolism. In the occult perspective, it represents the state of spiritual death that occurs when the soul loses its connection to its higher purpose or divine nature. The soul trapped in Irkalla is caught in a kind of spiritual limbo, unable to evolve or transcend. It is a place where the soul's attachments, illusions, and unresolved issues remain unresolved, leading to stagnation and stagnation alone. One of the most prominent myths associated with Irkalla is the story of Inanna's descent to the underworld. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and war, ventures into Irkalla in search of power, only to be stripped of all her attributes, her clothing, her crown, and even her life. This myth represents the soul's descent into the deepest levels of darkness, where it must shed its ego, desires, and worldly attachments before it can be reborn. Inanna's descent is symbolic of the soul's necessary journey through spiritual death, where all that is false or superficial must be relinquished before transformation can occur. The soul's passage through Irkalla reflects this process. It must enter the dark realm, confront its illusions, and experience the dissolution of its attachments before it can rise again in a new form. The story of Inanna's return from the underworld is equally significant. After being rescued by her aides and brought back to the world of the living, Inanna is reborn, transformed by her time in the depths of Irkalla. This mirrors the occult belief in the necessity of facing darkness in order to achieve enlightenment. Inanna's return represents spiritual rebirth, a resurrection of the soul after it has undergone its necessary trials in the underworld. The myth is a powerful initiatory story, illustrating that the journey through Irkalla, though filled with suffering and uncertainty, is an essential part of the soul's evolution. In occult practice, the role of Irkalla is often seen as one of deep introspection and self-awareness. It is a realm where the soul confronts the harsh reality of its own limitations and weaknesses, forced to reflect on its past actions and choices. This process is not one of immediate reward, but of long-term transformation. The soul must endure the trials of Irkalla, confronting its fears, ego, and attachments before it can emerge with new insight and understanding. The psychological and spiritual significance of Irkalla is profound. In occult teachings, it symbolizes the parts of the psyche that are buried deep within the unconscious, hidden from conscious awareness. These aspects of the self, often filled with fear, shame, and unresolved trauma, must be faced head-on if true spiritual growth is to occur. The silence and isolation of Irkalla reflect the internal state of the soul that has cut itself off from the divine or from higher consciousness. Just as the soul in Irkalla is trapped in darkness and silence, so too is the individual who neglects their inner work, trapped in a state of spiritual inertia. Inanna's journey to and from Irkalla, then, is not simply a myth about death and rebirth. It's an allegory for the soul's continual cycle of spiritual renewal. The descent into Irkalla is not an end, but a transformative process that, once completed, leads to a higher state of being. This descent is necessary for spiritual awakening, as the soul must first confront and integrate its darkness before it can rise into the light of higher consciousness. The occult significance of Irkalla, then, is clear. It is the underworld of introspection and inner transformation, where the soul sheds its illusions and falsehoods only to emerge purified and reborn. In this way, Irkalla serves as a reminder that facing our own darkness, the parts of ourselves we often fear or suppress, is an essential part of the path to self-realization and spiritual freedom. Just as Inanna returns from the underworld transformed, so too can the soul emerge from the darkness of Irkalla, not defeated, but empowered with the wisdom that only the underworld can provide. In Norse mythology, the concept of the underworld is dominated by the realm of Helheim, ruled by Hel, the daughter of the trickster god Loki. Helheim is not a place of eternal punishment or fiery torment like the Christian vision of hell. Instead, it is depicted as a cold, shadowy domain where the souls of those who died of sickness, old age, or other non-heroic causes find their rest. In this way, Helheim differs from other underworlds where the fate of the soul is determined by its moral or spiritual actions during life. Here, the dead are not judged for their deeds, but are simply brought to a place of quiet repose, a place that reflects their neutral or unremarkable end. However, this neutrality is not a space of peace, but of spiritual inertia, where the soul remains in a state of stagnation, neither progressing nor regressing. In occult traditions, Helheim symbolizes the feeling of spiritual stagnation that can arise when the soul is disconnected from its higher purpose, or divine will. It represents a pause in the journey, a moment of spiritual inertia, where the soul is forced to reflect on its past actions and the unresolved aspects of its life. Souls in Helheim are not actively punished, but they are not allowed to move forward either. The frozen, desolate landscape of Helheim reflects the emotional and spiritual isolation that comes with this state. It is a place of stillness and quiet suffering, where the soul must confront its own internal chaos and unresolved conflicts before it can move on to a new phase of existence. The occult significance of Helheim, then, lies in its role as an archetype for the soul's need to confront its own inner stagnation. When we feel spiritually adrift or disconnected from our higher selves, we enter a state akin to Helheim. In such moments, we may experience a deep sense of isolation, as if we are stuck between worlds, unable to find direction or purpose. Just as the souls in Helheim wander in a cold, lifeless place, so too do we find ourselves stuck in a spiritual limbo, unable to progress or move forward until we face the issues that hold us back. This is where the deeper work of the soul begins. It must come to terms with its inner conflicts and unresolved issues before it can move forward into greater spiritual awareness. Hel, the ruler of Helheim, is often seen as a figure that embodies this principle of spiritual stasis. In her half-living, half-dead form, she symbolizes the boundary between life and death, the threshold that the soul must cross in order to transcend its current state. As the daughter of Loki, a figure of chaos and transformation, Hel is a reminder that even in the coldest, most desolate spaces of the soul, there is the potential for change and rebirth. Though Helheim may appear to be a place of darkness and despair, it is, in fact, an important step in the soul's journey toward greater understanding. In the Norse understanding of the afterlife, the soul's journey through Helheim is not final. There is always the potential for spiritual rebirth, for moving beyond the stagnation of this realm into a new phase of existence. This rebirth may occur through reincarnation, through entry into Valhalla for those who die honorably in battle, or through eventual spiritual liberation. For the soul in Helheim, this rebirth is possible, but it requires the soul to face its own inner conflict, isolation, and inertia. It is a process of confronting the deepest layers of the self, the parts of the psyche that have been ignored or suppressed, and working through these issues to bring about a new sense of clarity and purpose. In the occult tradition, Helheim can thus be viewed as a necessary and transformative space. It's not a place of ultimate damnation, but one of reflection and self-examination. In the face of isolation and stagnation, the soul is forced to reckon with itself and its past. This is where the work of healing and growth begins. Just as Helheim itself is a cold, barren land, so too are the inner landscapes we must traverse when we confront our own spiritual inertia. But it is through this process, through confronting the darkness and the coldness of the soul, that true transformation occurs. Helheim, in this sense, is both a warning and an opportunity. It reminds us of the consequences of spiritual neglect, of failing to confront our inner darkness, but it also offers the possibility of growth and transcendence. Like the souls in Helheim, we too may find ourselves in a place of stagnation or despair, but through conscious effort and spiritual discipline, we can move beyond this frozen land and enter into a new phase of spiritual awakening. Thus, Helheim serves as a powerful symbol in occult teachings, reminding us that even in the darkest, most desolate moments, there is always the potential for renewal and transformation. In the Christian and medieval view of the underworld, hell is portrayed as a vast and terrifying domain, with the infamous structure of Dante Alighieri's Inferno providing one of the most enduring maps of this realm. The Inferno, as described in Dante's Divine Comedy, is divided into 9 distinct circles, each representing a different sin and corresponding punishment. The further down into hell a soul descends, the more severe and intense the suffering becomes. Dante's hell is meticulously structured, with each circle designed to fit the nature of the sin committed in life. For instance, the first circle, Limbo, is home to virtuous souls who, though they lived good lives, never accepted Christ. These souls experience a deep sense of longing, though they suffer no physical torment. The subsequent circles, however, are increasingly horrific, filled with fire, ice, and other excruciating forms of punishment, each tailored to the sin that led the soul here. In the occult tradition, Dante's vision of hell is often interpreted as a metaphor for the inner spiritual journey, a descent into the depths of the human soul, where the seeker must confront their own darker traits and hidden desires. While the punishment in Dante's hell may seem extreme, it symbolizes the profound purification process the soul undergoes in confronting its inner darkness. The idea here is not just that hell is a place of torment, but that suffering is an essential part of the path to redemption and spiritual growth. The soul must descend into the darkest parts of itself, face its deepest fears, and endure trials that strip it of illusions, pride, and attachment to the material world. Each of the 9 circles of hell represents a different aspect of the human condition, one that must be purified through suffering. Lust, gluttony, greed, anger, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery. Each of these sins has a specific punishment attached, mirroring the way these emotions or actions distort the soul's relationship to truth, love, and spiritual wisdom. The punishments are symbolic. The gluttonous are trapped in an endless storm of rain and hail, the violent boil in rivers of blood, and the fraudulent souls are condemned to wear masks of deception. These tormenting images are not just physical. They also reflect the internal suffering caused by these sins, how indulgence in base desires, selfishness, and dishonesty create internal chaos and disconnect the soul from its higher calling. In occult philosophy, the 9 circles can be understood as the levels of the psyche that must be navigated in order to achieve true spiritual freedom. The sins represented by each circle can be seen as the shadow aspects of the self, those parts of the psyche that are driven by ego, fear, and attachment to earthly desires. The journey through hell, then, is a path of confronting and integrating these dark aspects, purging them so that the soul can achieve enlightenment. While the path through hell is fraught with difficulty and suffering, it is only by descending into these depths that the soul can purify itself and rise to higher states of consciousness. The key figures in Dante's hell, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and other demonic figures, are not just embodiments of evil in the traditional sense. In the occult view, they represent the forces within the human psyche that oppose spiritual growth. Lucifer, the fallen angel, represents the rebellion of the ego, the desire for power and control that leads the soul away from divine truth. Beelzebub, often associated with pride and vanity, symbolizes the desire to be above others, to elevate oneself at the expense of spiritual humility. These figures are not just external adversaries, but internal forces that must be confronted and understood in order for the soul to transcend. In occult practices, these figures are seen as representations of internal struggles that everyone must face on their spiritual journey. They represent the temptations of the material world, the distractions that pull us away from the higher purpose of the soul. By recognizing and confronting these figures, by resisting their pull and integrating the lessons they offer, the seeker can begin to break free from the chains of materialism, pride, and fear. It is only by descending into the deepest parts of the psyche, where these figures dwell, that one can truly transform. Dante's Hell, with its vivid imagery and structured levels of suffering, serves as a powerful allegory for the soul's descent into darkness. The deeper the soul goes, the more intense the purification process. But this descent is not without purpose. Each circle, each torment, serves to strip away the false self, revealing the true, enlightened soul beneath. This process of purification is central to the occult tradition, where suffering and adversity are viewed as tools for spiritual growth. Through the trials of hell, the soul is forced to face its flaws, confront its darkness, and ultimately emerge transformed, ready to ascend to higher realms of spiritual consciousness. In conclusion, the Christian and medieval view of hell offers a profound map of the inner journey that the soul must undertake in order to reach spiritual liberation. The 9 circles are not just a portrayal of external punishment, but an intricate reflection of the internal work required to purify the soul. Through the journey of suffering, the seeker confronts the shadow, cleanses the soul, and ultimately transforms the self. Hell, in this sense, is not merely a place of eternal damnation, but a stage of profound inner transformation, one that leads to a higher understanding of the self and its connection to the divine. In Aztec mythology, the journey through the underworld is known as Mictlan, a complex realm where the souls of the dead must travel through 9 levels to reach their final resting place. Mictlan is ruled by Mictlantecuhtli, the god of death, and his consort Mictlantecuhtli, the goddess of death. Their domain is a place of both transformation and purification, where the soul must shed its earthly attachments and confront the obstacles and trials of death before reaching its eternal rest. The journey through Mictlan is arduous, as each level presents its own unique challenge, often symbolizing the stages of spiritual purification that one must endure in order to transcend the mortal realm. The 9 levels of Mictlan, according to Aztec beliefs, represent a series of trials and obstacles, each more challenging than the last. These trials are often depicted in vivid and sometimes terrifying imagery, designed to reflect the internal struggle that the soul must face. The soul must cross rivers, navigate treacherous paths, and encounter dangerous creatures, all while enduring hardships that mirror the psychological and spiritual trials one faces in life. Each level of Mictlan requires the soul to shed another layer of attachment or illusion, gradually freeing itself from the earthly realm in order to enter the final, peaceful resting place. In occult interpretations, the journey through Mictlan is symbolic of the process of spiritual ascent, where the soul must face and overcome its deepest fears, desires, and attachments. The 9 levels are often seen as stages in the process of spiritual awakening and growth. Each level corresponds to a specific challenge that the seeker must confront in their quest for enlightenment. These challenges are not external, but internal, representing the psychological and emotional barriers that prevent the soul from achieving true freedom and understanding. The trials of Mictlan can be seen as a metaphor for the human experience, an ongoing struggle between the self and the forces of ignorance, fear, and attachment. In this sense, Mictlan becomes a powerful allegory for the spiritual journey that every individual must undergo. Just as the soul must pass through each level of Mictlan, shedding its attachments and illusions, so too must we confront our own inner obstacles in the process of self-discovery and spiritual transformation. Mictlantecuhtli and Mictlantecuhtli, the gods of death, play a crucial role in the occult significance of Mictlan. In Aztec mythology, these deities are not seen as mere figures of death, but as powerful forces of transformation. They represent the necessity of death in the spiritual cycle, a death that is not just physical, but symbolic of the shedding of the old self, the ego, and the false attachments that keep the soul trapped in the material realm. In occult teachings, these deities symbolize the need to confront and accept death, both as a physical event and as a metaphor for the death of the ego and the illusions that prevent spiritual growth. As the soul journeys through Mictlan, it is guided by these deities who help it navigate the challenges and trials of the underworld. In occult traditions, Mictlantecuhtli and Mictlantecuhtli are often seen as guardians of the soul's transformation, ensuring that the soul's passage is not only a purification, but also a process of deep self-discovery. Their role as guides reflects the importance of embracing death and transformation as essential aspects of the spiritual journey. The 9 levels of Mictlan are not just stages of suffering or punishment, but opportunities for growth and enlightenment. In occult practices, this journey is often viewed as a process of individuation, where the soul confronts its deepest fears, desires, and unresolved issues in order to achieve a higher state of consciousness. The levels represent the stages of spiritual ascent, each one a necessary purification that leads the soul closer to its ultimate goal of divine unity. Just as the soul in Mictlan sheds its earthly attachments and illusions, so too must the seeker in the occult tradition release their attachments to the material world and confront the darkness within themselves in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Thus, the journey through Mictlan serves as a powerful reminder that the path to spiritual growth is not easy. It requires courage, resilience, and the willingness to face one's inner darkness. However, just as the soul eventually reaches the peaceful rest of the final level of Mictlan, so too can the seeker achieve spiritual peace and enlightenment through the process of inner purification and self-discovery. In summary, Mictlan offers a profound map of the soul's journey through death, transformation, and rebirth. Its 9 levels symbolize the stages of spiritual purification, where the soul must confront its attachments, illusions, and fears in order to achieve a higher state of consciousness. The gods of Mictlan, Mictlantecuhtli, and Mictlantecuhtli serve as powerful guides in this process, helping the soul navigate the trials of the underworld. The trials of Mictlan are not just punishments, but opportunities for growth, making this underworld a vital part of the soul's journey toward enlightenment. The Tibetan Buddhist concept of the underworld is not one defined by a singular static realm of the dead, but rather a fluid, transitional state known as the Bardo. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo is the intermediary stage between death and rebirth, a place where the soul is freed from the constraints of the physical body but remains bound by its attachments, desires, and illusions. It is a realm of intense potential, where the soul experiences visions, encounters with deities, and profound tests that ultimately determine its next incarnation or its potential liberation. Unlike other underworlds, the Bardo is not a place of punishment or suffering per se. Rather, it is a space of purification and spiritual awakening, where the soul must confront the emptiness of all things in order to transcend the cycle of samsara. In the occult tradition, the Bardo is seen as a space where the soul's attachments to the material world and to its previous incarnations are severed, allowing it to either ascend into higher realms of existence or descend into another cycle of rebirth. The Bardo is divided into several distinct phases, with each phase representing a unique spiritual challenge. During these phases, the soul encounters a series of visions, some peaceful and benevolent, others wrathful and terrifying. These visions are manifestations of the soul's own mind and karma, the accumulated actions, desires, and attachments that have shaped the soul's journey. The most well-known text describing the Bardo is the Bardo Thodol, also known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which outlines the experiences the soul faces after death. The Bardo Thodol describes the soul's encounters with both peaceful and wrathful deities, who are seen as projections of the soul's own mental states. These deities are not external figures, but represent the forces within the individual's psyche. Both the enlightened, compassionate aspects of the self, represented by the peaceful deities, and the aggressive, fear-driven, and attachment-laden aspects of the self, represented by the wrathful deities. The soul must recognize these deities for what they are, and understand that they are not external forces, but parts of the mind that must be confronted and transcended in order to progress on the spiritual path. In occult practices, the Bardo is often understood as the final test of spiritual mastery. The soul that has not attained a sufficient level of spiritual awareness may be overwhelmed by the terrifying visions of wrathful deities, becoming ensnared in fear and confusion, which leads to rebirth. However, the soul that is able to recognize the peaceful deities as representations of enlightened aspects of the self, and the wrathful deities as manifestations of karmic obstacles, has the potential to achieve liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth. In the occult view, the Bardo is a time of great opportunity and danger, where the soul must either break free from the cycles of illusion or remain trapped in the endless cycles of samsara. The key to navigating the Bardo, both in Tibetan Buddhism and in occult traditions, is spiritual awareness. The soul that has cultivated wisdom, compassion, and detachment throughout its life has a much greater chance of recognizing the true nature of the Bardo experience and, as a result, attaining liberation. In contrast, the soul that has been consumed by worldly desires, attachments, and ignorance will struggle in the Bardo, unable to distinguish the real from the illusory, and will likely find itself caught in another cycle of birth and death. The soul's ability to remain calm, clear-minded, and compassionate during the Bardo experience is what determines its fate, whether it is reborn into another cycle of suffering or attains enlightenment and liberation from samsara. In occult philosophy, the Bardo represents not only the state between death and rebirth, but also the in-between states that we experience in life. Just as the soul must navigate the Bardo after death, so too must we navigate the Bardos of our waking lives. Those liminal spaces where we are in transition, caught between one phase of life and the next. The Bardo teaches that every moment of life holds the potential for transformation and liberation. Every fear, attachment, and desire that arises in the mind can be seen as a Bardo-like experience, an opportunity to either transcend or be caught in the cycle of suffering. Thus, the teachings on the Bardo are not merely for the dead, but for the living as well. They remind us that the ultimate spiritual work is to recognize the true nature of reality, to confront our fears and desires, and to navigate the in-between states with wisdom, awareness, and equanimity. The Bardo also introduces the concept of Cho, a practice of cutting through attachments and illusions. In the context of the Bardo, Cho represents the act of severing the karmic ties that bind the soul to the material world. These ties are often visualized as cords or threads that bind the soul to the cycle of samsara. In the Bardo, the soul's ability to sever these cords is what determines whether it remains trapped in the cycle of rebirth or ascends to liberation. The practice of Cho, in this sense, becomes a powerful tool for both the living and the dead, teaching that liberation is not just about transcendence, but also about the conscious severing of attachment to all that binds us to illusion. In summary, the Tibetan Bardo represents the ultimate spiritual test, where the soul must confront its deepest attachments, desires, and illusions in order to break free from the cycle of death and rebirth. In occult traditions, the Bardo is not just a post-death state, but a model for the soul's journey through life as well. It teaches that each moment of transition, whether in life or in death, holds the potential for spiritual awakening and liberation. The soul's ability to recognize the true nature of its experiences, free from attachment and fear, is what determines its fate in the Bardo, and, ultimately, its liberation from the cycles of samsara. The underworlds described across various cultural and spiritual traditions are not merely places of punishment or posthumous judgment. They represent the profound journeys of the soul, journeys that symbolize the necessary confrontation with the darkness, both external and internal, that each individual must face in order to achieve spiritual transformation and enlightenment. Whether it is the Greek underworld of Hades, the Egyptian Duat, the Norse Helheim, or the Tibetan Bardo, each realm provides a map for navigating the labyrinth of the human psyche, illustrating the internal challenges that must be overcome to reach higher levels of spiritual consciousness. The idea of the underworld as a place of confrontation with the shadow, those aspects of the self that are denied, repressed, or hidden, is central to occult thought. The journey through these realms, with their trials, suffering, and purification, is not about external punishment, but about the soul's inner work. In occult traditions, the underworld represents a process of alchemical transformation, where the base elements of the soul, fear, ignorance, desire, are burned away in the fire of suffering and purification, leaving behind a more refined, enlightened essence. This process of descent into darkness is essential because it allows the soul to confront its deepest fears, heal its wounds, and ultimately transcend the ego's attachments to the material world. Each culture's map of the underworld presents a unique path, but they all share a common theme. The soul must face the darkness within, whether it's through confronting guilt and punishment in Dante's Hell, navigating the treacherous trials of Mictlan, or enduring the visions in the Bardo. These journeys highlight that suffering is not a punishment, but a necessary catalyst for growth. In the occult view, this suffering is not something to be avoided, but embraced as a means of spiritual development. The underworlds teach that it is only by facing the shadow, by confronting the parts of the self that we often seek to ignore, that the soul can evolve. Furthermore, the underworlds remind us of the cyclical nature of existence. Life, death, and rebirth are not linear, but rather interwoven, with each death leading to a new form of life. The figure of Persephone in the Greek underworld, who cycles between the realms of the living and the dead, embodies the eternal return of life and death. Similarly, the Egyptian Duat's trials reflect the cyclical nature of existence, where the soul is reborn after passing through the trials of judgment and purification. The idea of spiritual rebirth is not confined to any one culture. It resonates across all these traditions, suggesting that death is not an end, but a transition, a stepping stone to greater wisdom and understanding. The occult view of the underworld emphasizes that no matter how dark or terrifying these realms may seem, they are ultimately paths to liberation. They are not places to be feared, but realms that hold immense transformative power. Each soul, whether in the Greek Hades, the Egyptian Duat, the Mesopotamian Irkalla, or the Tibetan Bardo, faces its own unique challenges, yet each journey ultimately leads to a higher state of being, whether that's through spiritual awakening, reincarnation, or transcendence. In modern occultism, the underworlds serve as powerful metaphors for the spiritual path that every individual must take. We all face moments of darkness, times when we must confront our fears, doubts, and weaknesses. These moments can feel like a descent into an underworld, but they are also opportunities for profound transformation. As occult traditions suggest, It is through facing the darkness, whether personal, psychological, or spiritual, that the soul can ultimately rise to a higher state of consciousness, unburdened by illusion and attachment. Modern occultists often view the underworlds not as separate, isolated realms, but as states of consciousness that we navigate throughout our lives. Just as the souls in the Duat must face their judgments, so too do we confront the consequences of our actions and choices. The soul's journey through Mictlan's levels, or the trials of the 9 circles of hell, mirrors our own struggles with self-doubt, guilt, and personal flaws. The Bardo, with its potential for either liberation or rebirth, symbolizes the moments of transition in our lives when we are at a crossroads, faced with choices that determine our spiritual trajectory. Each underworld, in this sense, offers a map for navigating not only death, but also life, a guide for understanding how we can overcome the darkness that holds us back and move toward spiritual freedom. Ultimately, these underworlds teach that the true purpose of confronting the darkness is not punishment, but transformation. The goal is not to remain trapped in these realms, but to use them as stepping stones toward enlightenment. Through trials, purification, and self-confrontation, the soul emerges stronger, wiser, and more aligned with divine truth. The journey through the dark realms, whether in the afterlife or in the depths of our own consciousness, is an essential part of the path to higher spiritual awareness. In modern occultism, this process of descent and rebirth is often seen as a central tenet of personal and spiritual growth. Occultists believe that each individual can, through conscious effort, descend into these dark realms of the psyche and return transformed. The underworlds serve as a reminder that the path to spiritual mastery involves not only transcending the light, but also confronting the darkness. For it is through this confrontation that true wisdom, freedom, and enlightenment are achieved. Thus, the underworlds, across cultures and traditions, represent not just the realms of the dead, but the spiritual landscapes we must traverse in our journey toward self-mastery. They serve as potent symbols of the soul's ability to transcend the darkness within, leading to an eventual return to the light. A return that is not merely a physical resurrection, but a spiritual awakening, a profound transformation that resonates through the soul's connection to the divine.